Hi, it's Nate Charles, and welcome back to the Rule of Law Brief. Today, I want to talk about the debate over doxing ICE agents, but even more importantly, I want to talk about what that debate reveals about the moment that we're living through. This commentary is based on the juxtaposition of two public interventions from the last week. On one hand, Senator John Fetterman warned anti-ICE protesters not to dox federal immigration agents, framing the issue primarily as one of safety, harassment, and excess by the public. On the other hand, Fareed Zakaria warned that the Trump administration is actively eroding the most important achievement of Western political culture, the systemic constraint of state power. I think those two comments are reacting to the same facts, but they point in very different directions. Let me start by drawing a bright line. Violence is wrong. Threats are wrong. That is a hard red line. Nothing I'm about to say crosses that line, and nothing that crosses that line should be inferred from anything I'm about to say. But setting that aside, we need to be honest about what we're actually debating here, because words like harassment and civility are often used to sanitize something much older and much more legitimate: sustained pressure on power and power structures. This country was not founded on the idea that the public should be polite to government. It was founded on the idea that the public should constrain government. The right to petition the government for redress of grievances is not limited to the right to file a complaint and wait around quietly. It's the right to be persistent, disruptive, and uncomfortable. Historically, that kind of pressure has always irritated people in power. In modern language, it often gets dismissed as harassment. In the American tradition, it's called citizenship. So when John Fetterman frames this moment primarily as a problem of public behavior, I think he's answering the wrong question. The real question is not whether people can or should dox ICE agents. The real question is why people feel compelled to identify government officials through adversarial means in the first place. In a functioning democracy, the public should not have to extract basic identifying information about officials who are exercising state power over them. The information should already be public. This brings me to something that shouldn't be controversial, but in this moment somehow seems to be. Terms like public servant or civil servant are not euphemisms. They are literal descriptions of the role. When you work for the government, you are a servant, structurally, not rhetorically. You hold delegated authority that does not belong to you. It belongs to the public, and you exercise it only by their consent. The moment government officials forget that, government begins to fail. It insulates itself. It treats accountability as interference, and corruption starts to take root. I am very proud of my government service, and I use that word deliberately. It was service in the most literal sense of the term. To be a member of the federal government is to serve the people, not manage them, not rule them, serve them. And service requires accountability. Accountability requires visibility. Now, let me widen the lens, because this is where Fareed Zakaria's analysis matters. Fareed Zakaria argued that the defining achievement of Western civilization is not identity, religion, or culture, but the deliberate limitation of state power. That achievement only makes sense when you understand the historical problem it was meant to solve. Nearly 2,500 years ago, Thucydides captured the oldest and bleakest rule of politics. In the Melian dialogue, he wrote, "The strong do what they can, and the weak suffer what they must." And for most of human history, that wasn't just cynicism, it was a description. What made the West genuinely unusual was that it refused to accept that as inevitable. From Magna Carta forward, Western political development was an extended rebellion against that logic. Constitutional government, independent courts, due process, transparency, and civil society all exist for one reason: to bind power. Zakaria's warning is that we are now drifting back toward the older model, not by abandoning the language of rights, but by hollowing out the institutions that enforce them. Masked federal officers operating domestically, arrests without visible accountability, pressure on courts and the press. These are signs of power slipping its restraints. What makes the contrast with Senator Fetterman so revealing is that both are essentially reacting to the same facts. Where Fetterman urges restraint by the public, Zakaria warns against accommodations to unbounded state power. On this issue, they are on opposite sides. And I am firmly with Fareed Zakaria. Because when you normalize anonymous mass domestic enforcement and then tell the public that the problem is their reaction, you are not defending democracy. You are accommodating an authoritarian trend. Secrecy is supposed to be the exception, not the rule. And nowhere is that more important than inside the United States. There are narrow exceptions: undercover operations, foreign intelligence services, but domestic immigration enforcement isn't anywhere near those things. ICE is not a covert organization. It operates at home, it exercises arrest authority, but only in a civil context. It initiates life-altering legal processes. These functions are not clandestine by nature, and they never have been. So when ICE officers operate masked without visible identification or accountability, we should be honest about what that represents. It's not merely a safety measure, it's a legitimacy problem. Public servants should expect to be challenged, criticized, and pressured by the people they serve. That's not dysfunction, that is democratic accountability doing its job. What they should not expect is anonymity while exercising coercive power over the public. And this is where the conversation about doxing gets distorted. If the government refuses to identify itself while exercising power, people will try to identify it anyway. That does not necessarily make doxing virtuous, but it makes it predictable. Sunshine has long been understood as the primary disinfectant against government corruption, because power that cannot be traced also cannot be constrained. So when Senator Fetterman says, don't dox ICE agents, my response is simple. We shouldn't have to. In a democracy, the state does not get to act in secret and then recoil when the people demand to know who is acting in their name. That principle is not radical. It is foundational. And any government that grows comfortable with unbounded and unbridled power, and any public official who accommodates that comfort, has already forgotten who they serve.